Alright, today I'm going to show you how I animated this head movement.
Hello everybody, I'm Kevin Jackson. I'm an award-winning animator. I won Best Animation for my animated short runners in 2013 at the Lignum Vitae Film Festival. That's held in Mandeville in Jamaica, the center of the island. I also won Best Animation, Best Actor, and Best Script at the 2018 Lignum Vitae Film Festival, as well as Best Animation at the 2018 GATFest Film Festival and Best Animation at the 2018 Columbus Black International Film Festival in Ohio. So today what I want to talk to you about is the Caribbean's involvement in World War II, specifically in the Royal Air Force. We've had several Jamaicans, in fact several persons from the Caribbean, who have fought in World War I and World War II. But in World War II we had quite a lot of very talented fighter pilots. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, as well as showing you an animation technique. So this project that I'm introducing to you is called The Air Between Us, and it's about a Jamaican fighter pilot during World War II and some of the racism that he faced. And I'm going to be showing you an animation technique that I use to do head turns in 2D cutout animation. So in traditional animation, you would draw the face in one position, then the next, then the next, then the next, which can become time consuming. Now, if you only have to do it once, it's not that bad. But if you have to do it several times throughout a film, then it becomes very time consuming. On the flip side, with this particular technique, it takes a while to set up. But once it is set up, animating the head turn is very easy. So I'm going to walk you through that. I'm going to walk you through that process, or I'm going to walk you through the technique that I use. And during the bits when it's kind of dragged out, because as I say, it takes a while to set up, I'm going to be talking to you about the history of the Caribbean's involvement in the Royal Air Force during World War II. All right, so grab a cup of coffee and watch the rest of the video. This is Winston, our Jamaican fighter pilot. I don't have his mask on right now because I want to show you what his face looks like animated. Now, I've already started some of the controls. So I've already built controls for the eyes and the eyebrows, and a few other pieces like the mouth and so on. But what I want to actually demonstrate to you today is how we're going to make the face turn. Now, if you know anything about 2D animation, to make a face turn, you have to draw it in several different positions, over and over, and that can become time consuming. So this method I'm going to be demonstrating to you shows us how to build controllers that allow us to articulate that movement without having to animate it over and over. So in this particular scene, Winston is pretty much flying his plane, but the plane has been hit and is going down, and he's trying to rescue it. As you can see here, I'm making a mean face just to show you the articulation that I have so far. Right? We can make his eyes broaden, we can furrow the eyebrows, grit his teeth to really show that intensity. Right? Here's a picture render of what that would look like in the final result. Right, so that's what it would look like in the final result. This is just a picture render, not an animation render. We'll see the animation when we get to the end of this segment. Alright, so just showing you as we pull along the timeline, you'll see that we've already animated the plane kind of jerking around as well. Right, so what exactly am I going to be accomplishing today? Today I want to create controllers that will allow me to turn the face, and it's a long process. So while I do that, I'm actually going to be telling you a little bit about the history of Jamaican fighter pilots, and I will touch on some Caribbean fighter pilots in general as well. Before I get into that, how many of you knew that our famous runner Arthur Wint was a fighter pilot in World War II? He also joined the Royal Air Force in 1942
and that's where he flew the most famous plane of all in the Royal Air Force. Is called the Spitfire, which is what's featured in this animation. And he left the Royal Air Forces in 1947 to attend St. Bartholomew's Hospital as a medical student. So imagine that in one lifetime, becoming a medical doctor, winning Jamaica's first gold medal, and flying in World War II as a very successful fighter pilot. And this is why I want to highlight this piece of history, because we have so many heroes that we've forgotten about. Yes, they get honored on Poppy Day, they get honored during a Heroes Weekend or Heroes Day, but even so, a lot of people don't pay attention to what's happening on the TV, and we're so distracted these days with all the different streaming platforms that we don't really get to focus and celebrate our history properly. In fact, I bet you didn't know that the first black pilot to fly for Britain was a Jamaican by the name of Sergeant William Robinson Clark. He flew in World War I during 1917. I'm going to continue the history lesson in a bit, but let me just describe what I'm doing on the screen right now. And yes, I'm going to be back and forthing between describing what I'm animating and talking about the history, so I hope you don't mind. So what I'm doing here is I'm pretty much just setting up a controller for the mouth, or completing the controller for the mouth, and this allows me to open and close the mouth like you see what I'm doing here. And you can see the teeth are underneath those lips, and I can make this guy smile, or make an O shaped with his mouth, that sort of thing. And this just gives me the ability to change his expression at will. Makes it much easier to animate later on. Alright, so let me get into the meat of the matter now. So right here I have this face that's at a 3/4 angle, right? And that's how much I want it to turn. So I'm using this as a reference or as a guide to help me to determine how I need to kind of mesh the face that I have right now into that face. So when it turns smoothly. So I'm creating a control here. You see that little lever I have created in red? Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I am going to I'm going to make sure that the software MOHO Pro recognizes that I want it to control things, right, in a specific way. So now we're in the window where we're going to control things. So what I'm going to do, I'm turning this lever all the way left to basically symbolize that I want the head to turn left. So what I need to do now is I want to go down and find the face, the layer where I created the face, and I'm going to manipulate those points or move those points to match this drawing that I have here, that 3/4 view. So right here I've selected a face, and these points are basically the different points that map the curves on the face. I can move these and shape them any way I want. Right now I'm moving the ear behind the face, right? That's one of the first things you want to do when you're simulating a head turn. The next thing I want to do is grab the different points and then start moving them and shaping them to look like the reference drawing that I've selected here, right? And what this is doing, you see the controller in red and it's pointing left. What this is doing is telling the software whenever I turn that control left, it is to move the points into the positions that I'm putting them in right now. So I'm just going to manipulate the face, and as you can see here, I'm shaping the jaw, I'm shaping the back of the head, and look, see, as I turned the lever, you saw the jaw moving a while ago.
So I'm gonna just reshape the face a little bit more, and then I'm gonna reposition the ear, and I just want to reposition that ear to match up with the reference. Let me just fix this. And we're just gonna bring this ear on top. All right. And then we're gonna move the eyes over as well. So pretty much, you know, all the parts of the face are on separate layers. The eyes are on a separate layer from the nose, the mouth, the ears, the eyebrows, the hair. And what we're doing is basically just repositioning them to match up with the reference, you know. So as you can see, I just turned it so you can see the eyes move with the face. But this is pretty much the process that we go through to do the head turns. You know, we shift these around, attach them to a controller, and so when we move that controller, it manipulates, you know, how you see the face. It makes that face looks like it's turning, just like what we're seeing here. You see the ear go behind the head when we turn, the eyes move, etc. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move the eyebrows next, and you're gonna see, I think when you see me move the nose, you'll start to probably understand it or feel it a little bit better. But let's start with the eyebrows. Actually, no, let's go with the nose. So you see, I just shifted it over, and then what I'm going to do now, of course, the perspective is wrong. It's still facing us, even though it's kind of slightly turned. So I'm just going to start manipulating the points and try to shape it to basically be the shape of the nose that I would expect to see at this angle. Yeah, that looks about right. Adjust the nostril just a little bit. We'll just test this in a bit. We just fine tune this little piece here. All right, here we go. So you see the nose is now moving as well, and it definitely gives that impression that this thing is three-dimensional. You know, if you're doing 3D animation, then you would actually be doing it three-dimensional, but with 2D, we're tricking it to look three-dimensional and attaching that to a controller that we can use to manipulate, which is pretty similar to how 3D does certain things as well, like facial rigging. All right, so let's move the eyebrows. So the eyebrows, I have these controllers on the eyebrows that allow me to kind of articulate a shape at any given point in time. So I'm just gonna highlight them and then move them over and reshape them. You always have to reshape the parts when you're moving it to a certain angle, because once you just shift it over, the perspective isn't right. You know, so things kind of get a little narrower when you're turning your face, right? Depending on which direction. So you have to make it match up with that perspective.
See how that looks? It's already starting to look like a head turn. So what I want to do now is I want to take the mouth, first the mustache and then the mouth. I'm going to move it over, and then it's even going to more look like this head is turning. And then the last bit we're going to focus on is the hair. You know, the hair, this guy's hair is a little bit cumbersome because I created all these little curls, so I kind of have to move them one by one. But as I said, as much as that is time consuming, I only have to do it once. Once I've tied that to the control, it's just a matter of just moving the control left and right. See how the mustache moves with the face? Yeah, the more of these parts you start moving and changing the perspectives, the more and more it starts looking like a 3D head turn actually. Anyway, this is not a tutorial. This is more of a walkthrough, just to give you an appreciation for the process so you can understand what's possible. So I'm going to speed through the rest of this video while I give you some more of the history. Now, in World War I, there was a color bar in place, and that basically prevented black people from becoming pilots. That's of course until one Jamaican became a pilot in 1917 through a lot of hard work and constantly being turned down. But of course, his passion and determination for flying and his endearing personality made them lower that bar. And I mentioned his name earlier, Sergeant William Robinson Clark. Now, between the wars, that's between World War I and II, the barriers went up again. Right? That was until 1939, when Britain ended up losing a lot of fighter pilots in World War II missions, right? And of course, as you'd imagine, they desperately needed more persons in the sky and on the ground, especially after 1940. If you don't know what happened in 1940, that's when the Battle of Britain took place. That was a very devastating moment for Britain. You should look it up. But I'm not going to talk about it because that's not a part of this particular conversation. Now, at this point, thousands of Caribbean men and women answered the call to help the mother country. Now, whether that was because they were looking at it as a way to strengthen their loyalty to the monarch, or maybe it was just that desire to have that, call for adventure. There are some people like that, they like the whole adventure and excitement of war. I do believe for some it may have been for loyalty reasons, but I do believe for many it was the whole notion of fighting for freedom. Black people had already been accustomed to slavery, so they understand what it's like to be enslaved. They understand the importance of freedom. And I believe this to be true simply because there were many black soldiers from the Caribbean who paid their way to go to England to go and fight this war. Now, racism in England was light compared to what was being experienced in North America at the time. It was by no means easy, right? At least not at first. It took some time for British soldiers to get used to having black soldiers with them. Eventually, they did become comrades, but definitely in the beginning it wasn't easy. There's a book by Mark Johnson called Caribbean Volunteers at War, The Forgotten Story of the RAF's Tuskegee Airmen. Now, despite the Caribbean valiantly fighting for the Royal Air Forces, winning medals and, helping to win the war essentially, this piece of history, sadly, is mostly forgotten, especially when one recognizes that the Windrush scandal that we're currently going through is heavily connected to these events. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Windrush scandal is, it pretty much kind of came to surface in 2018. The British government started wrongly deporting people of Caribbean descent and of many different descents, but it's especially affected the Caribbean and Jamaica especially. Right? These are Jamaicans living in Britain, since they were children, from before even 1973. Right? It's called Windrush because in 1948, the first ship to arrive with Caribbean citizens who came to England to take up jobs to help rebuild England after the war, that ship was called the Empire Windrush. And so that set of people, or during that generation between 1948 to 1973, that generation is known as the Windrush generation. Right? These were not people who came to England and overstayed their welcome. Right? In 1948, there's something called the British Nationality Act. And this gave status and the right of settlement to citizens of the United Kingdom's colonies. Simply put, at that time, if you were born on one of the colonies, then you were a British citizen once you came to Britain or once you migrated to Britain. Now, imagine not living in Jamaica since 1948, a whole of 72 years ago, right? Then you're either forced to come back to Jamaica, or on return to England from a visit to Jamaica, you're denied entry. Imagine that at age 60, 70, 80, when you've worked all your life, went to school, made friends, married, have children, and you take a trip to Jamaica and can't go back to England. You're stuck in a country where you never grew up. You don't know a soul. You have no clue who your relatives are in that country. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be saying, how you live in England so long and you don't sort out your status properly? You just go there and live and expect, say, you're a citizen now. But the whole reason they went to England in the first place was because the Nationality Act gave them this opportunity. But couple that with the fact that your ancestors, they went to fight war for this country, they shed blood, they lost limbs, and they even died for the country, right? And this country is kicking them out. Anyway, I'm here to highlight the positive, not the negatives, right? I want to honor a few fighter pilots, even though my story is a fictitious one, about a fictitious person. In my view, he is really representing all of them symbolically. So, I already mentioned Arthur Wint. There was also Flight Lieutenant John Jellicoe Blair. He was born in St. Elizabeth. Now, he was a flight navigator for Halifax bombers, and his role was very crucial. It was a very high pressure role, right? He had to use maps, compasses, and rulers to accurately guide the planes and keep them on track and find the bombing targets and sites, right? Now, he flew 33 operational missions and he earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for bravery. If you don't know what the Flying Cross is, look it up. It's a very prestigious medal. Then there is Billy Strawn. Well, I think his name is pronounced Strawn. It's spelled Strachan, so maybe it's Strachan. Somebody, maybe you can correct me. But yeah, Billy Strawn or Billy Strachan, a Kingstonian. Now, this is a man who was turned down quite a few times when he tried to join the Royal Air Force. And this is a man who sold his saxophone and risked U-boat infested waters to get to England, right? And he was still turned down. If you don't know what U-boats are, these are basically, military boats. Well, they're submarines, basically, these German submarines. So he risked going through those waters where he could have possibly been killed just to get to England to join the Royal Air Force. Anyway, luckily, there was an officer there who took an interest in him, and he was accepted and trained as a navigator at first, just like John Blair. But he was eventually retrained as a pilot, and he qualified in record time at that, only 7 hours of training. He did 15 missions as a bomber pilot and gained fame for his clever ways of escaping German pilots. What he would do is he would let the German pilots get close to his tail, and right when they're close enough, he would just cut the engines and then let the big heavy Lancaster plane that he was flying in, dive, take a dive. It sounds scary to turn your engines off, but it's a tactic they use all the time. And then when the plane slows down and dives, the German planes would just overshoot past him overhead, right? Now, this is a man who moved up in the ranks from sergeant to flying officer to flight lieutenant, right? All of these are great achievements. And he went on to be a civil rights pioneer. Lastly, I'm going to mention Ulrich Cross. You really can't mention World War II fighter pilots without mentioning Ulrich Cross. He's from Trinidad. He's born Philip Louis Ulrich Cross, or it could be Louis, Louis, pronounced differently depending on whether you're named by a French person or English person. So he's the most decorated Caribbean West Indian of World War II. He was a navigator for bomber planes as well and attained the rank of squadron leader. He also attained the Distinguished Flying Cross and Distinguished Service Order for the fine example of keenness and devotion to duty and exceptional navigation ability. Now, that's a mouthful. Now, he was also a member of a group called the Pathfinder Force that perfected techniques for precision main force bombing. That simply means that instead of dropping bombs from tens of thousands of feet in the air, they would fly as low as 1,200 feet and then dive to 50 feet, drop the bombs, and fly out of the area before the blast went off. Because these bombs had an 11-second delay, so they had very little time to get out of there. Now, this is a guy who flew 80 missions. There's a movie about him. It's called Hero. It's been touring the world for the past 2 years. I would definitely encourage you all to go and see it if you can. It's currently for sale or for rent on Caribbean Tales. You can go to their website or Amazon. Anyway, thank you guys for allowing me to tell you these stories. I really hope you stuck with me until the end. And even more so, I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. Please though, tell other people about this because it's a really significant part of our history. These are our heroes. We don't hear about them often. It isn't taught in our history class. So please, go look them up, and the next time you see someone selling a puppy in honor of our vets, you know and you understand the meaning now. Okay, let's get back to the animation. So if you were watching along, you would have seen where I created the left and right head turn and him lowering his head. Right now I'm creating him raising his head. It looks awkward right now, but you know, everything has a refining process, so I'm going to go refining through it. But pretty much I'm almost done, and you know, when it's all connected you will see how this works. So here I am just raising up the eyebrows, because when you lift your head or lower your head, your features kind of basically become a little, I don't want to use the word squished, but because of the perspective they look a little closer together, they look a little narrower. So pretty much I'm here just working out the perspective, and that's what I've been doing with all of the different views that you saw. You know, right here you're gonna see me adjust the eyes, adjust the nose, adjust the mouth, and here's a preview of what it looks like when I move the head up and down. Alright, so I'm going to fix the eyes. Right now it looks a little flat, like a paper just being rotated away from you, so I have to rotate the eyes so that they look like they're forming around a round face, right? So that looks a little bit better. You get another preview here of the head going up and down. The jaw could do with some adjustment. We're going to fix that later on. I'm going to just work on the hairline right now, just to make sure this thing feels accurate. You know, you have to make sure that it feels volumetrically correct and at the same time maintain the features of the character, so the character still looks recognizable from every angle. Alright, so pretty much I'm going to skip ahead to the end of this head rotation, or tilt up rather, and I'm going to show you how I connect the controllers to make the face shapes work seamlessly together. So you would have seen this controller before. This controls the eyes. I'm going to create a similar controller for the face. I'm going to start with a circle, and we're going to make it around the same size, position it same vertical line, and make it blue so it stands out easier. So I'm going to add these two proxy bones, or control bones as they're called, and basically just like these two, they're going to control the left and right direction, up and down direction of the face. So I'm just naming them. I like to name them so they're easier to find when you need them. And then we're going to create this little circle here, which is a target. Now targets control these proxy control bones. I'm just trying to center it, trying to align them. Having them aligned will make the animation work much better. So the next step is I'm going to limit the angles of these to 30 degrees each, so that when you turn them, they don't pass the edge of the circle. And pretty much I'm mapping the direction of those proxy bones to the direction for the head. So turning this one left and making it control the head turn to the left, turning it right, doing the same thing on that side, and same here with the up and down motion. When this proxy bone goes up, I want the head to turn up. So it's a bone control, you know, manipulating the other bone control, or the proxy controlling the face controller. So once we've done these, what we want to do now is we want to connect the targets to these proxies. And the target is essentially going to control the proxy bones, and the proxy bones are going to control those head turn bones. Right, so here we are connecting them to the target, and now when I move the face, you'll see, or when I move the target rather, you see the face moving. The eyebrows are getting stuck behind. I know exactly why that is. I'm going to fix that in a moment. But yeah, so you can see some distortion happening, and that's, you know, that's because the face is a little complex in shape, so you have to do some fine-tuning to get it just right. But you get the gist. You know, with this I can animate the face really fast if I want to. You know, I can, let me set. Now we are closer to finished. As you can see, I'm moving the controller around and you're seeing the face turning and everything's looking good. So now we can pretty much animate. So let me just set a keyframe here. I'm going to set another one here. Oh, something's going wrong with the eyebrows. Something I'll have to fix. But let's just continue anyway. So pretty much I'm just going to move the face in directions like he's looking at the controls. His eyes widen, you know, maybe he's shocked at something. Raise his eyebrows, worried. Looking dead ahead. Now we're going to put a determined look on his face. Just raise his eyes so we can see that he's looking up through the brows. And now we're going to grit his teeth. And yeah, literally looking at just a few seconds and we have that animation because of these controls. Alright, so we've just animated about 5 seconds, so I'm going to render so that we can look and see what it looks like. So there you have it, a quick and dirty animation, 5 seconds long, done in no time, right, because of these controllers. Now as you can see, it takes a while to set up, but I can now animate all the facial expressions I want in very quick fashion because of these controls. So I hope you guys enjoyed the process, and I hope you learned a lot about the history of our fighter pilots. So next time there's Poppy Day, which is November 11, please support them, because now you know what it means.